more than just acquiring them, you're completely shifting their workforce at the same exact time. So kind of think of it as like you're doing a corporate restructure with that organization while you're trying to actually acquire them.
I'm very big on creating guides and embedding analytics, static help text, guidance workspace. If you have Workday help, let's do knowledge articles.
But yeah, I appreciate you guys' time making this happen. Again, Scott, as soon as I got that message, I was actually in the airport coming back from a trip that I took to corporate. And, you know, I was exhausted. It was a very work meeting heavy week. And to get your message that you wanted to do something with you and Dani was like amazing, man. It made my whole week.
Awesome.
So thank you both again for making this happen. So I think a great place to start, Scott, would be to get a little taste as to what your experience has been with mergers and acquisitions. And I think that experience is just a great place to start.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's always been fast and furious, right? That's how my last company would grow, right? Would gobble up other mom and pop shops around the country. Well, I say that it was US and Canada. So it was
Okay.
always fast and furious, right? We're talking at least 3 to 5 acquisition deals per quarter, sometimes Q4 a little bit more, right? People want to get it off their books, things like that. But it was a very efficient, smooth operating machine. So it always kind of sets the stage for what is the governance, right? You need the right people in place to kind of help facilitate the deal. Sometimes it's really hard to get the data from the seller and then the timing, right, based on your closing. So we made it a very smooth and efficient process, but that takes time, right? That's decades of doing M&A. So it's a cultivation of skills and processes over time.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I cannot wait to dig a little bit deeper into that. So 3 to 5 acquisitions a quarter.
Mhm.
Was that pretty consistent, or would it vary sometimes? Sometimes you would take more on within a quarter.
It would vary, right? So sometimes in
Okay.
December, I remember before I had my team trained up to help me, and I'm so glad I got there. I remember I had to crank out 5 at the beginning of December. So I'm up late at night just trying to make sure they get in by like, let's say it was 12:05. I'm loading all those in. So it can be very heavy depending on one, you're going through the governance of, getting approval to close on that deal. Depending on where geographically that is, you have to jump through all those hurdles and get that approval. And then based on the market control, things like that, if you have too much market control, there's not enough competition. So in essence, it can vary, but Q4 is always kind of a nightmare in that sense.
Interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned that it was a lot of mom and pop shops.
Yeah.
Did you find that that was a little bit easier to integrate into a current system, especially a much bigger system?
I
Would you
would,
be able to kind of run that workflow through maybe a non mom and pop shop?
yeah, so a lot of them welcome it because they're going from paper everything and filing cabinets and things like that to the modern age. They're like, okay, wow, like I could have my I-9s done in Workday online. I can access my payslip on a mobile device. Like that's crazy. So I remember the last deal I went out and traveled for was in September. I was actually out in New York, and I remember just literally doing onboarding employee by employee, having a kiosk set up and then having their phones available and downloading Workday, right? Getting them set up and they're like, wow, I can access like my payslip on my phone. That's crazy. And when I met with Workday at my new company, they're giving you the metrics on where the average employee accesses Workday the most. You're accessing time to clock in and out, their payslips, W2, W4, you name it, and then it's in and out, very transactional. Well, if we can make that a pleasant experience, getting that at your fingertips, they welcome it. So bringing companies that are traditionally kind of mom and pop, very non-technical into the modern age, it's typically very well received.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Danny, the last time that we spoke, one of the things that I really walked away from was your ability to communicate. And I'll put it to you this way: you probably have a much better word for it, but sell the system
Mm.
to the company that you're acquiring or even the company that you're merging with. And I that was just kind of a newer point to me. I think that's just something that stuck with me and landed with me in a completely different way. So I can see where that is probably your biggest asset when acquiring a smaller mom and pop shop, is that that sell is like so easy, right? Because they can taste something new. They instantly become paper everything to everything now being digital and accessible just at, a couple clicks of a mouse or a couple thumb presses, right? So that is really, really fascinating. Scott, so you talk about governance when it comes to managing these deals, right? You say that is what made the process kind of a well-oiled machine. Can you touch on that just a little bit more?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So at my last company, and I attribute a lot of it to that because that's where the bulk of my M&A experience always is. We had we're broken out into regions. I'll kind of set the stage there. So each region had its own business development manager that would chase deals, work with the seller, get the proper approval from like a government standpoint and all that. And then they'd bring it back to the table, work with the HR manager at my new company, its business partner, whoever is there to help you facilitate from an HR standpoint, bring it back to the team and set up a cadence, right? Based on the timeline of when that deal is going to happen, we need to have a regular cadence on meeting. If we're still just kind of getting a pulse and trying to, kind of woo the seller, we're going to do it over a period of months, but we're still going to keep it on our radar and in the pipeline. So based on the timeline, which timing is everything, we'll set the cadence there, meet with the leaders, and that's going to be the representative per department. Kind of the key things employees always want to know is, what are my benefits, right? Do we have a richer plan we're moving to? So let's have the key leader from a benefits perspective there. When am I first going to get paid, right? That too, because if you are, let's say, weekly and you're moving to biweekly, sometimes employees can feel like they're getting gypped out of money, right? Things like that. So it's always ensuring a smooth transition, having the right key leaders there to facilitate conversation and kind of ease that transition. So it's having the right people in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that a lot. So I know that you two have way more M&A experience than I do. Scott, I know that you've landed in a brand new job as well recently. So I don't know if you've had the opportunity to go through an M&A since landing at that new job.
I haven't, and that's what we're
Okay.
prepping for right now. So the different timelines and everything like that, which gives me a little bit of breathing room. I'm coming from very, very heavy M&A to not as heavy, but I'm helping build that roadmap and what each process will look like. So
Yeah.
to be continued. I'm excited though.
Okay, cool. Well, I will definitely follow up about that.
Absolutely.
So Dani, I wanted to pick your brain about this. Being at different organizations, are there certain aspects of kind of working through this workflow that stay relatively the same across these different organizations? And if so, what are they? If there are key differences, major differences, what are those? What are some of those as well?
I mean, for starters, the worker's data is always going to be incorrect. So, especially at first. And what I mean by that is, so before you actually go live with the acquisition, you have access to what's called like a data room. So you get to see static information about employees. Then from there, after you've signed the deal, you actually can get access into their systems. But until then, you don't even normally have access into their systems. Depending on how cooperative the other person on the other side's being, you'll get somewhat quality data. But that's typically towards the end. So once they start validating the actual information. So I would say that's really consistent, is the actual mappings that you put employees in. So as far as like their job titles or their job profiles, that normally is the hardest part, I think. And then you have access provisioning that is wildly different though. So I've seen companies, we've gone through this process for 18 months and we haven't even been into their Workday system yet. But we've been on the other side of it because our payroll and benefits were treated separately. Then I've seen companies where they give you a 30-day notice and they're like, you're getting into the system now. Where I've seen it though is in private equity, they move a lot faster. I worked for financial institutions that will take a year and a half to do it. So I think it depends on the actual industry too, where the timelines do kind of change around. But that's a really like big hidden cost, is actually the time spent. So like if you haven't brought them into your systems yet and you haven't converted their payroll and benefits, you actually need to do a cost analysis because you might be spending more money keeping independent just benefit providers or independent systems, because you go through an exercise too of you need to pick up all their systems and eventually you need to start sunsetting them because you've got to see some synergies occur just kind of across the companies. So I would say that was hands down the biggest, is the time that continually changes throughout acquisitions.
Yeah. So knowing that, is that something that you actively push for whenever you're in this process of acquiring a different company? Do you push for kind of a shorter timeline whenever possible?
I think it entirely depends on the size of the company and where they're actually operating. So if you're talking an Israel company, that's very different than dealing with the US. And the speed at which you can go at, just because if you haven't operated in that country before, it's a lot more complex. Sometimes you actually choose to hire an HR professional first and get them in before you decide to move forward with it.
Yeah. So you touched on getting the initial data. The initial collection of data is one aspect of the M&A process that I find really, really fascinating. So if you all could kind of wave a magic wand and work within your preferred method of collecting this data, would you prefer all of the data all at once? Does that getting access to the data, does that typically come in the form of like, here's our spreadsheet? Or is it like, hey, we'll get you full system access to our system? And which one of those do you prefer? Do you prefer everything at once, or kind of a trickle effect of like, just get me the pieces of information that I need at the time?
Who do you want to go first, Dani?
Oh, you go, Scott. This is the Scott show.
So we would get it from the data room, like Dani said, or a spreadsheet, but it depends on the timing of when you get it. So let's say you got your first data sheet 3 weeks ago. During that time, there's going to be new hires and terminations, and not just terminations, people that just don't want to come over from the deal. So sometimes you don't want the data too early too. I would say at least a week out is preferable, right? Allows you to put it in Sandbox, run a roster, send that out for review, because data, it always comes back to data. Clean data is your number one foundation for an acquisition, right? Because if you briefly look at it at a glance and you're like, okay, these socials don't even look correct, or like there's extra characters, you're just gonna be like, I can't even work with this, right? So that kind of sets the stage there. But if you get it at least a week out, that allows you to do your roster, get approval, put it in production, and that's kind of the sweet spot. Otherwise, if I get it 3 weeks out, I'm just going to do a demo run and Sandbox and then just sit on it. So I kind of prefer that, but I do like all the data at once in one file, right? The more data pieces you have, a smoother process it is from an employee perspective. They'll get their onboarding tasks and they'll just pick, okay, cool, I'm just validating everything's correct. Sign off. Wow, like welcome to Workday. I like that. I don't want to get too much into it because I kind of want to save some of that for later, but I'll leave it at that.
I love it. What about you, Dani? What would you prefer?
I think it depends, because it depends on how long this integration is supposed to go. So if you're going to convert their payroll and benefits, you need way more time, because so for example, what I've had to do in my past is I've had to continue their benefits, but put it into our Workday system, which took us 90 days in a consulting team to pull it off, right? So if you're just looking and you just need provisioning access, and say you acquire them in April, they're going to have their own benefits and payroll at their end of year, the most data you're going to get is all their job information. Get their comp information and call it a day. We require a few weeks for it because it ends up being actually much more complex for it, just due to the amount of countries we do operate in. But their personnel files and things like that, I've actually never received that on day one. And because depending on who you're working with, they might not give you access into everything right away. So you might actually uncover that you have a lot more documents to import in than you really thought you did.
Absolutely. Yeah, there somehow always manages to be like this spreadsheet that someone forgets to give to you, right? Like, oh yeah, we've only been talking for a couple months about this major project. Like, like how does this happen, right? But yeah, I think that was my instant thought as soon as you said a week, Scott, because I just think like, but what if the data's wrong? What if the data's not complete? So it really does sound like you guys have like a really well-oiled machine. You know exactly what it is that you need, and it's more just a process, right? It's just churning through these acquisitions, which is really fascinating as a business model, right? You guys have really locked into what works for you all.
Yeah, my last company, that's definitely how it was. And a lot of them, kind of what Danny's talking about, we never had to keep that on our radar as far as like legacy systems, because even if they were in a system, it wasn't Workday. We've never encountered that.
Mm,
It's always like just from hard copy papers, right? So Workday was just very easy to sell because it's just welcome to the digital age.
Yeah.
That's going to be different in my new company, right? Because we actually might encounter that now. So then what does that look like, right? Then we're going to have to run those cost analysis, everything Danny's talking about, or previously, sorry, it was never in my purview. So I'm having to
Yeah.
train my mindset, right? And traditionally, it was always just like, let me just churn it out and I just will put the data in and worry about it there, set up the hierarchy, security, whatever. But I'm training my mindset to be more of a partner to the business, not just that analyst pushing it through. So that's what I love these conversations for. I get to take things back and bring it back in house.
Absolutely. Yeah. On that, Danny, what do you find is the most difficult aspect of mapping worker data? I would imagine that it's probably job profile related, but I'm curious to know what your perspective is on that.
I think it's feelings. Like, I know you're probably not expecting that with
Interesting.
Workday,
Yeah.
but I think it's it's the humans behind the scenes. So when you go to do a mapping exercise, not everyone stays at the company. Not everyone gets to keep their pay that they do. When you're actually fully integrating them into your organization. So we don't, how I've seen it in other acquisitions I've done, we don't ever just pick them up and plop them right in as if they're just keeping their jobs. So there's a lot of going back and forth with, I know the PVPs do with managers, and they're going back and they're like, is this someone that is going to keep their job? Are we going to put them into a new role? Are they going to get new compensation? So as you can see, there's so many variables with it that you don't even know if that person's going to stay at the company. You don't know if they're going to leave or you're going to get promoted throughout it. So there's more than just acquiring them, you're completely shifting their workforce at the same exact time. So kind of think of it as like you're doing a corporate restructure
Yeah.
with that organization while you're trying to actually acquire them. That is why the data gets super messy. People move around. Like I said, it's static and they may not even update it. I mean, I've imported people that weren't supposed to be imported into the system because someone thought, oops, I forgot to do that. So there becomes a really big actual version control problem with some of this stuff. You have all the different team members too. And I think having one team like an operations actually own the data with the tech team is very valuable, because if you're having finance come to you and they're saying, nope, cost centers are all changing. I've had this happen last minute. Well, operations is the one that gave me the data. So now I need to remap everyone again. And then you just have all these different files that you're continually working with. So you need to right away confirm the actual ownership. I feel like you need to have like rules of the road of like who is actually doing what, and be that natural leader. If you're not seeing that across the business, you be the one to do it, because at the end of the day, if something is wrong, they don't care who told you what, they care that you put it into the system. So you've got to kind of think a little bit like that, like you're trying to actually protect the infrastructure throughout this process as well.
Yeah, yeah. While all of this change is happening at the same time, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's such a great way to put it. Is the hardest thing to map is the emotions, right? The feelings
Yeah.
behind,
It's
because
unpredictable.
it is such a major shift in the lives of these workers, these employees who are real life human beings,
Yep.
who have had their professional world completely flipped upside down. So that's really, really interesting. Scott, can you walk us through your previous organization's workflow when it comes to acquiring these mom and pop shops? Just generally speaking, you can be as specific or as generic as you want. But can you walk us through kind of a mental model that you have as to how that process begins and how it progresses and how it ends?
Yeah, so I guess I can kind of start from like a workday perspective. We used to just kind of once they're in the system, kind of start there, I guess. There's always kind of that grace period after you put them in the system, right? You're gonna, even though you got the data as clean as you initially maybe thought it would be, there's always cleanup after. Kind of what Danny was talking about. Let's say we acquired a company where there's a local CFO and a president. Well, their roles are instantly going to change because they're going to report to somebody. So from an ops and finance standpoint, that's going to maybe be a district manager and a district controller. At each level, we had district, division, region, ops, and finance. So they would roll into that hierarchy, have a restructure, and things like that. Even during that grace period, we would still review the data and see what needed to be corrected. After that, then we're like, okay, we're kind of out of that threshold. Let's maybe review is that a necessary job change, right? And then if you have comp agreements in your job change, maybe you need to have that skip that step. So there's all these kind of variables from that standpoint. And then clean up beyond that. So at first it was always let's data dump them under one specific leader and then reorg from there. Because if you have time entries approvals going to one leader that isn't trained on how to do it from Workday, that creates a lot of chaos
Mhm.
and confusion, right? So let's data dump them there, reorg after the fact, and later build that out. Cost centers too, because finance is always changing their mind. They're like, I want this new subcode under this district kind of hierarchy. Okay, cool. So we would correlate the districts or locations to a cost center and then further build those out too. So many moving pieces that kind of continue to just come over I want to say the next month as the dust settles, people get more comfortable, and things like that. So that's kind of setting the stage there a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Danny, did you have a question on that?
So, okay, how do you go back and historically report though? So, if you end up putting them under one manager and then you look at like kind of the reporting behind manager changes that have occurred,
Hmm.
do you go back and correct it as of the start of when you acquired them?
Yep, we do it back of the hire date.
You backdate it.
Hmm.
Okay, so how long does that typically take throughout the process? Like, are you 8 weeks in and then you go and backdate everything?
No. So we'll try to hammer that out within the first week or two because then you have
Oh,
too many
wow.
processes in the worker history and then the conflicting changes, as we all know. So
Hmm.
thankfully, Workday allowed you to correct certain processes that conflict and the time changes there. So that gave us a little bit more grace there too. But we try to
Right.
hammer that out within the first week or two. Who are the true leaders? And then we'll have timekeeper roles separate for editing time, but who is a true leader? And let's build that reporting structure there from a Workday perspective.
I like that idea because managers, when they're brand new, they don't really know what to
Mhm.
actually, how to handle the system. How I've done it in my past is we acquired a larger company. So it would have been just so much rework to redo all the cost centers. So we really pushed and we're like, we need to get this as close as possible. So when you're having like 3 or 4 acquisitions, then you often see corporate restructures that typically follow that. And then they change all of the managers, all of the different mappings too at the same time. So I'm normally hit with both of them within like 6 months.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the name of the game, right? Like,
Hmm.
all of these things are just moving targets. And it doesn't matter how long these discussions happen, there's just always something that just pops up and it's like, we should probably do it this way.
Always.
Scott, I'm really curious to know how, because it sounds like your previous organization was really concerned with just getting these people into the system, giving them a taste as to what it will be like to be in Workday and the additional benefits that they're now gaining from being acquired into this larger organization. How do you work, or how did your organization ensure a smooth transition to teaching people this massive system
Hmm.
while all of this stuff is still changing behind the scenes?
Yeah, no, that is such a fantastic question. I'm always big on putting myself in the end user's perspective, right? So I go back to what my wife says. She's like, I hate Workday. And I'm like, well, it's because you're not having a smooth experience, right? So
Yeah.
maybe your HRIS
Yeah.
team needs to retrain the way they think. So I'm very big on creating guides and embedding analytics, static help text, guidance workspace. If you have Workday help, let's do knowledge articles. Give that end user every opportunity for success, right? Before they have to raise it to a case, submit a ticket. There is like this list of like contacts we give the end user to, especially from an M&A
Mm,
perspective. It's like, hey, here's who you can contact for a payroll perspective. For Workday, here's like Workday help at whatever company you're at. So it goes to that inbox. So we give them those tools for success, but then within Workday, let's build out these processes to help them too. A one-stop shop might help too from a dashboard perspective where you can embed guides and links there into SharePoint, things like that. Obviously, I'm very big on sharing knowledge. So I would do stuff like that and record videos like, hey, this is how you can go to the time and scheduling hub and the edit and approve section. I saw that was recently renamed. So whatever the new verbiage is there. But from that hub, this is a calendar view where you can do everything in a one-stop shop, right? So let me embed that video and maybe an announcement at the top of the hub. So giving the end user and all encompassing, I already said it, but every opportunity for success.
yeah, yeah. Danny, how did that process end up looking for some of these acquisitions that maybe took a little bit longer? How do you ensure that these companies, these brand new workers into Workday, feel comfortable with the system and feel knowledgeable enough about their business processes to actually perform them in the system?
Yeah, we really just scaled it back and we're like, hey, here's the top 5 things. So luckily for us, with the last acquisition that we did, they came into our systems to get access just to kind of like provisioning perspective, but they were still going in their old legacy HCM system for a few months. So it was really tricky at first. And we're like, hey, this is what you need to do in this system. You just need to worry about this area. But then when we shifted them over and they fully went into Workday, we did office hours, and as painful as they can be to sit on a call and just anticipate any question you could possibly get, they're so effective. Because number one, I think it shows an effort of like, hey, I'm not just sitting behind my computer and I'm actually here to help you. Let me show you what you need to know. If I was an employee, these are the 5 things that I want to know. Like, don't put too much information out there. Don't give them a 30-page guide. It's going to be information overload. But like, give them, I like Scott's idea of little videos. We've done that too in the past. And then we had something called the Employee Hub. So it was a one-stop shop where we said, hey, go here. Here's all your time off policies. Here's how you can do all of these different actions in one place. And then from there, we had office hours too. And then we just, like, I gave them my contact information. I said, if you have any questions, reach out to me directly. You'd be surprised. Not a lot of people reached out because I think that they were in a good place, but also just having that contact of like, hey, who can I like reach out to if I have any questions? And for us, it's especially helpful for them to get used to the system because you want them to go in and you want them to check their information. If you imported the direct deposit, is it accurate? So we actively like made people check that. And then the whole onboarding side of it is your information accurate if we merge you into the system? And I would send out email reminders like, if you don't do this, the risk is your money is going to go into someone else's bank account. So I suggest that you open up Workday.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you
No, I
said,
love that.
selling it. You have to give them an offer that they can't refuse. And that includes using Workday. Why are they going to use Workday? Well, it's going to make their life a lot easier by being able to see at their fingertips their W-2s, and then they don't have to email someone and wait a long time to do it. So if you want a mortgage, here you go. Look it up. This is how you can get your verification very quickly. Or if you want to sit there and have it stalled, just don't do what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. In a lot of ways, yeah, you definitely have to like convince these employees that they hit the lotto.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah, like
You won
you didn't
today.
do anything. Yes,
Congrats.
exactly. You had nothing to do with this. And guess what? Your life is way better as a result of that, right? But going from, wait a second, our company's getting acquired to that is, that's a really important conversation. And I feel like that is definitely one that both of your organizations have done really, really well. So I just find it so interesting. Scott, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to say, kind of building upon that, if you have a mature Workday tenant, because sometimes you'll be reactive in it for a long time. But if you are integrating them into a very mature Workday system, then you can also sell it from here's all these processes in place, right?
Yeah.
Kind of going back to our first podcast on worksheets and stuff like that. Here's how
Yeah.
you can have stuff set on schedules to make your life easier. Talk about an efficiency improvement. So you don't always have to export it to Excel. You can do so if that's where your lane is comfortable. But when you have those tools and processes in place in Workday, that really helps further sell it too. And it's just like, okay, wow, I welcome this change.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious to know how much flexibility you all offer in those conversations. I'm sure that whoever your point person is, from the company that's being acquired, oftentimes they'll come in with their own idea of what Workday does and what it's capable of, or what it should do as an HRIS system. How flexible are you all to being receptive towards new features or new updates, new business processes, new modules even that you may not currently have?
I'm very receptive to it, just not to new reports. Too many
Okay.
reports muddy down the water. So I don't want to create an ad hoc report for every request. Here's your standard report, right? And you can teach them how to save your prompts on it as like a filter and stuff like that, so they can auto-populate it the next time. Always open to new ideas and building new processes, such as leveraging request framework. The one thing I push back on those new reports, because we opened that door initially to kind of ease the pain. We gave everybody report writer, but clawing that back is way too
Oh,
hard,
wow.
right?
Oh,
And then you have
yeah.
thousands of reports. There's a copy of a copy of a copy. You don't even know it exists. So be very cautious if you open that door, right? You're putting a band-aid on a very serious issue, and then years down the road, you can't ever really claw that back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. What about you, Danny?
I'm obviously I try to be as receptive as possible because I don't think any of us would be successful in our jobs if we weren't and we
Yeah.
didn't listen to their feedback. But I had just launched, so we did our first phase of manager self-service recently. And one of them was on the contractor process of like, actually, hey, you got to extend and end your contracts. Well, I had 131 that I needed to get extended. And reaching out to these managers, some of them had 40 contractors. And that's the person that I chose to reach out to because I knew, I'm like, this person is going to have the most opinions about it because they used it the most. She came back and she gave me really good feedback. And I think if you put your ego aside and you're like, hey, I spent a lot of time building this, like it has to be perfect. Not everyone thinks it's perfect. Like you're not always going to get a trophy. But at the end of the day, at least you can learn like what they liked and what they didn't like because we're the ones buried in the system. But at the end of the day, they're using it. And
Yeah.
it really does need to work for them in the simplest way possible. But like the way that I kind of pitched it to them, and I was like, hey, this is how you're going to have control over your workforce. You guys have been asking for this. This is our first phase. We're going to see how it does. And then we're going to go from there. And we're going to give you more resources as a manager. And again, it's really hard to fight and say like, oh no, I don't want things to be easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just the way that you put that and sold that is just, yeah, there's no counter to that, right? Again, going back to our previous example, you're convincing someone that they hit the lotto. So it is such a science in a lot of ways, but very, very much an art form as well. Both of you have gone through a ton of M&As. I'm really curious to know, can you see the writing on the wall for M&As that have gone sour? Like, if so, how early do you see those, and what are those signs? Because I am really, really fascinated to know if you're like Nostradamus out here with bad M&As.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the data quality, right? I think that always sets the stage, but beyond that, the communication, right? So if your point of contact isn't very well receptive, isn't giving you the new data sheet, if you are pushing back, that is kind of a telltale sign, and maybe you need to delay the timeline of when you're going to acquire said company, if at all. Because one thing you want to always protect too, beyond the data integrity and stuff like that, is your culture, right? So if you
Mm,
aren't working well with this person initially, how is it going to be down the road, right? So coming from a servant leadership minded culture, that is of the utmost importance, right? How beyond how well you think they're going to integrate when partnering with them from a selling standpoint, everybody wants to make a dollar too at the end of the day. That's business. But long term, how is that partnership going to look? So that's kind of where my mind goes to. And that's where I think the business leaders at my last company did a really good job. Each company we acquired did integrate in extremely well. And you could see that in the stock performance too. I remember 2 years ago when I got stock once upon a time, it was $99. It's doubled since then. And so that kind of
Nice.
echoes throughout the business. So that was really cool to see at the time. Personally, I enjoyed benefiting from that. But it's not just from that financial benefit. It's knowing that you're setting the organization up for success. But also going back to, socials, things like that. If you see extra characters there, names and like misspellings, different formats, those are very telltale signs.
Fascinating. What about you, Danny? What do you think?
I would say the radio silence. Like
Mm,
Oh,
that
fascinating.
is it's an answer. And typically the cooperation is the biggest predictor of success. So I've seen people where they've been in really high up positions and they have flat out told me they've been responsible for getting me data and they're like, I don't have a job in 90 days. And I'm like, okay, like I think you do, just like
Yeah.
trying to make them feel better. But some of them are like, you know what? I don't have a job in 90 days, but I'm going to give you my all. Here's the information. And I think it depends on how much they like you, right? If you have someone who you get along with really well and they want you to be successful, because I've worked with people, they knew they were about to get exited. They called me afterwards and they're like, the writing was on the wall. And I was like, you know what? I just want to sit here and thank you because I'm successful due to your cooperation with all this. And you knew that you had nothing in return after all of this. So I
Yeah.
think number one is it's a lot of like, are they going to retain the employees? If they can retain them, I have seen more success if they offer them packages right away of like, hey, you're going to stay on and help us for the next 6 months. And then they're like, hey, we're here. But if they start kind of ghosting, which does happen, that's when you know it's going to get really, really rocky. And some people, they're not going to pass over information to you because they're really angry. So, and I see it a lot more in like the mom and pop companies where they've been
Oh,
there for
fascinating.
25 years and they
Yeah.
don't want to give this up. So they're not giving up their information and they're going to watch you guys suffer.
Yeah.
Not everyone's very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, you're upending someone's professional
Yeah.
life, right? In a lot of ways. So yeah, absolutely. I can totally resonate with someone feeling that way, right? Scott, has that been some of your experience as well with some of the mom and pop shops? Have you had some resistance?
Some resistance from the not necessarily the owners if you're like middle level management, because then your whole world's going to be flipped upside down. If you're the one selling
Yeah,
it
yeah.
as the local DM, kind of like or president rolling over into DM, kind of what Danny said, you'll stay on for a while, help kind of ensure a smooth transition, then maybe roll off. Or if it's a good culture fit and you're a strong leader, you mesh in well with the organization, you do have a long-term standing position and you can continue to grow from there. But I have seen some pushback too along the way. More often than not, it's been well received because we ensured it's going to be a smooth integration when getting a culture kind of pulse vibe from that original seller.
Yeah, yeah. I cannot wait to ask this question. Uh, this is one that will keep me up at night. I promise you. Um, so whenever you're in this process of acquiring another organization or even merging with another organization, hindsight is always 2020, right? You get to the end of the process and you just think, man, we should have done X, Y, and Z so much better, right? But for organizations like yours, right, where you're doing this on a regular basis, you get to apply that feedback right away. On the topic of feedback, how do you provide feedback to the overall team, maybe specifically the team that's doing due diligence? How do you provide them feedback to say, listen, we need to get a better cadence here, or we need to get much cleaner data, or listen, we need to set expectations from this perspective at this point in the timeline? How do you all provide feedback without sounding like sounding ungrateful or not sounding like a team player?
Yeah, that kind of it's you have to tread lightly there, right? Because you still want to keep
Yeah,
relationships intact, right? That's how you
absolutely.
operate. Each region or business line, in a sense, at my last company would have the HR manager or business partner, depending on what term you're familiar with, kind of set the stage each call and stuff like that. So the cadence of the scheduling of the meetings was around them, stuff like that. So we would gently give feedback on. Sometimes some of that is new to them. So if they're new in the role, they're kind of figuring that out. They have guidelines, there's leadership above you to support you, but sometimes you just kind of have to jump into things and figure that out. And it comes with time. Constructive criticism helps you grow, right? If you're not receptive to that, you're not willing to grow. So sometimes you just have to jump into that and kind of figure it out. But giving that is what allows you to have a strong team over time. So you have to run into some issues in order to grow, and then that's where you build each other up from there.
Yeah, yeah. Can you give me an example as to like maybe a piece of feedback that you've given recently, right? Like what are some of the more common aspects of feedback that you tend to, come across?
That was mostly in regards to my former team, right? I had a junior analyst filled team, at least at first. So it's very hands-on. It's very taxing in the sense of your time. The most rewarding thing I can ever say though was growing my team, and that kind of goes back to my first hire, my protege. I will always pump and promote her until the end of time. She got promoted in my absence. So very happy for her. Sometimes you kind of become that crutch when you are there for them to lean on. But I would give her constructive criticism over time, like, hey, I think what you did is perfect. I love the one thing I love about Workday, there's a million ways of how to do something. But if there was a more efficient way, I'd beg maybe this is what you could do in the future to kind of ensure a little bit of extra hand holding, right? Sometimes that really helps to ensure that smooth transfer of processes.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. What about you, Danny? Is there have there been instances where you provided some maybe critical or not so critical feedback to the entire process or the entire team?
Yeah, see, unlike Scott, I'll just light fires. If it's not working, I will call you and tell you immediately. No, I just think you get to a certain point in your career, to be honest, where that's normal. So throughout this whole process, people are working long hours, sometimes 16-hour days, and you need to give that feedback immediately. Let's go back to finance. I'm picking on finance today.
Yeah.
If finance just redoes all the cost center mappings, I'm going to immediately call them and ask them why. First of all, what's the impact of doing that? So they just completely changed our entire file. Now, what's the risk? Well, the risk is that data was all accurate and now it's completely inaccurate. So now I need to retest it, which is going to take me how many hours? And the solution is you're either going to delay my integration or we're going to load this in and then you're going to help me fix it all.
Yeah.
And I think too is I hold people accountable. I have very high standards, even for the people that work with me and even direct reports on my team. I've had the conversation. I do wait until afterwards because depending on how harsh it is, if it's a hard conversation, I'm going to get them through and we're going to get across the finish line. And then I'm going to give them about a week to settle in. And then I'm going to have the discussion with them that I expected so much more and they're capable of more. And I expect them to show up better next time. But I will tell them like all the great things that they did as well. But if we're just kind of handheld and we're told how cool we are, like our moms love to do to us for the rest of our lives, you're never going to be prepared for the real world.
Yeah.
So, and especially when you're dealing with situations like this, it's really just staying factual as to, hey, this is what happened and this went down. And when you're dealing with the different personalities of people worrying about losing their jobs, that's where it gets really tough. Giving people grace, but just because they're really exhausted doesn't mean that you get to lower your standards for your team.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. And so that source of giving feedback, that stays the same across the board, right? It doesn't matter who it is across the organization. Like for you, it's, hey, these are facts and I need to share these facts with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And you have postmortems, we call them typically. So if you've got a COO that's actually handling the project management side of this, you have regular cadence with them. I would talk to them directly and say, hey, this is what's going on. Can you help me here? So you've got allies in your corner if there's situations, and letting the other executives know. But like, again, don't go back to I'm overwhelmed. Go back to, hey, so if I don't get this in time, you're not going to have access into the system. And do you want to tell employees that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is just one of those aspects where there are just so many landmines. And again, there's a lot of egos that are outside of your control, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so you can't necessarily deliver everything gently just because there are two parties involved, right? Oftentimes. But the fact remains that, we're all here to make this a smooth transition for everyone involved, right? And there is a certain standard that needs to be set in order for us to operate well, right? And again, this is part of the business operating, is these mergers and acquisitions, especially at such a high volume, that if we don't get it right now, we better get it right the next time. So yeah, I'm really fascinated by this, this tug, this pull, of, hey, we made a mistake this time. What are we going to do about it the next time? Do we just continue to allow this just because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, or do we do we make the move, and how do we make that move gracefully in a way that we're not losing the favor of the people that we work with in our team? Scott, did you have something to add to that?
No, I kind of echo it, right? Like if you had every opportunity for success and you didn't properly communicate, well, yeah, you're going to get some maybe harsh constructive criticism, right? It's all about how you are handling the deal, not just that, how are you handling yourself too, right? Now, if you are giving it your all and you are doing a bang up job, just ask for help too along the way, right? There's a team to support you, and you have to be willing to ask for that help. Beyond that, as a leader, you have to be willing to go in there and look at it just to ensure, like, hey, is my employee like handling this properly? Do they have the support in place? Keep a pulse on that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't believe that we are just about at time. I don't know where this conversation just went. I can't believe it. But I definitely want to leave a little bit of time to have you all share a few things. But before we get to that, I do want to ask the question of, if there's someone out there in the ecosystem listening to this and they are just shoulders deep in a merger and acquisition that is just completely gone away from them, what would be one piece of advice that you would give them?
I'll have Dani lead on that one.
I would say put expectations in place and put timelines in place, and really try to be as factual as you can on it. Either you've got the information or you don't. These are the hurdles that you have, and these are the people you need to go to fix it. And I think kind of putting the emotions aside and the reactivity is the best thing you can do. And then go from there and talk to the people that can actually help you. And you know what? If they can't help you, then have a backbone and talk to people that aren't getting you the information and tell them the risks associated with it.
Yeah.
It's very simple.
Yeah. I love it. Scott, what would you say to that?
I can't beat that. I'll just have to echo everything Dani said. The only thing I can really go back to is, at first, when my first manager left, we didn't have anybody that could handle it from a Workday perspective. So we had to go into Process Monitor, dig up those old files, and try to recreate the issue, recreate the higher files. So I've had to sink or swim along the way. But to Dani's point, I just pretty much would echo everything she said.
Yeah, cool. So I definitely want to leave a little bit of space here at the end for you all to share any interesting updates, anything that you're currently working on that you want the ecosystem to know. So the floor is yours.
So I would just say, go switching gears in my mindset from just being that data pusher on M&A to where I am now, trying to be a true partner to the business. Start to roadmap based on the different timelines. What is a reasonable expectation of what we can build in Workday, right? Let's build out separate processes for stock and asset as far as a higher business process perspective. And let's kind of go through line by line there and account for maybe the different timelines. Beyond that, kind of coming in and just kind of rebuilding my team a little bit, that's been incredibly rewarding from a professional development standpoint. Assessing where they're currently at, doing some promotions that happened within my 7 weeks. So that's been rewarding. Beyond that, my protege, I mentioned, she got promoted in my absence. So it's been fast and furious drinking from the water hose, but I'm happy to be where I'm at. And, life happens fast and furious all around.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that, super quickly, Scott, I just appreciate the fact that you're not only building out systems and processes and stuff like that, but I can tell that you are so passionate about building the people around you as well. So if nothing else, man, congratulations on that. You're crushing it, and keep it up.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Dani,
That means the most to me because those relationships will transcend an employer, right? So that's what I value the most.
absolutely. Yeah. And you can check that box already, right? That's already happened. So yeah, kudos to you, man. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Dani, any interesting updates in your world?
I've had a lot of changes. So I think since, January, I stepped into a director role, and I decided to kind of take a look at my career as a whole and like what I wanted to do. I chased all the certifications and I did everything I could to learn as much as I could about Workday. I still know like 30% of it. But I've decided to really actually look at other things that I can do for the industry, kind of outside of just like the Workday configuration. I spent 8 years trying to really master in the best that I could. So I actually started a lot of like career advisory work. So now I'm at a point where I'm helping people in this get into the industry. Not only that, but get higher salaries. So teaching them really how to negotiate and putting them through career programs. I helped someone get an interview within 24 hours with no configuration experience at all. So really positioning people to market themselves to get a job or get promoted. So it's been exciting for me because kind of with my journey, as you know, I had times where I was told that I wasn't promoted or I wouldn't get the next role, and I pushed through those ceilings. And now I have the opportunity to help people do the same. So I'm absolutely loving it. It's more of like kind of my passion project is helping people, but hopefully I'll walk away with leaving people a little bit stronger than I found them.
Absolutely. That is awesome. So yeah, that is amazing. Where can people connect with you in case they're curious about any of that?
Start with going on my LinkedIn, and then you can go from there. It'll be linked with my website. So
awesome. Cool. And Scott, where can people connect with you as well?
Same thing, LinkedIn. It's my bread and butter. So definitely on my LinkedIn. And then I have my own personal website just for resources and stuff like that, on guides when I used to do them. I need to maybe circle back to that, but you can check that out. Very big on knowledge sharing. That's what helps the ecosystem grow. So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you can find my website from there too.
Absolutely. Thank you both again. I don't know where the time went. Seriously, I will welcome any conversation with you two at any point in the future. I just can't seem to get enough of them. So I really, really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Christian.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. Be sure to check out the helpful links and resources mentioned in the conversation in the podcast show notes below. Also, be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter to stay in the loop about future podcast episodes and Workday tips. I'm Christian Delcid on LinkedIn and at cdelcid21 on Twitter/X. I would love to hear any feedback about how to make this podcast better, so be sure to subscribe, connect with me, comment, and share with others. Thank you so much again. Have a great day. The Unsafe Harbor podcast is my personal passion project, and it is completely separate from my role with my current employer or the Workday organization. The ideas expressed on this podcast are my own and do not represent my employer or the Workday organization.